It's been a crazy week for the Silver and Black. Following a 41-24 loss to the Bengals, 3 coaches were fired, and now the team has announced 3 new hires, including Norv Turner. From the firings to the hirings, we're breaking it all down. Sin City Beat starts right now.
From Las Vegas, this is Sin City Beat.
Hello and welcome to Sin City Beat. I'm Mike Davis. Thanks so much for joining us. Sin City Beat is the show that dissects the Vegas sports world through the eyes of the sports reporters leading the charge. On today's show, we're breaking down an eventful week for the Raiders. During the action today, we got our very own Mariah Janos, sports reporter with Fox 5 Las Vegas. Willie G. Ramirez of WGRamirez.com. Look at that red suit. And our very own Vince Sapienza, sports reporter and anchor with Fox 5 Las Vegas. Thanks so much for being with us. So let's dive right in. Joe Burrow and the Bengals had a career day facing the Raiders on Sunday. Burrow tied a career-high 5 touchdown passes. Meanwhile, running back Chase Brown rushed for a career-high 121 yards. It was all amounting to 41 points, leading the Cincinnati Bengals to their first win of the season at home. The Raiders are now 2-7, one of 9 teams in the NFL with only 2 wins. So Mariah, what was going through your mind while you were watching this game?
Going through my mind, it was, oh wait, I've seen this before, because this is what happens every week. It's just the same script, if you will. We always talk about scripts in the NFL. Strong start, scoring on the opening drive, all unravels in the middle, a late touchdown that will not help anything in this game. And that's really it. And it was really disappointing to see, because once again, the defense doing their part, coming up big, and the offense just not capitalizing when the defense puts them in a great position to execute, and they just don't do it. And that's what was going through my mind.
What is that? What is the whole thing about them always scoring on the first drive and then not finding the offense the rest of the game? What is that, Vince?
Well, I mean, it's a few things. It's obviously the team's prepared. The team knows what the task is at hand, and there is talent on this team, despite what many people on social media are saying these days. That being said, it's the lack of adjustments, which is why we saw the moves that we saw late Sunday night with the firings of a trio of offensive coaches. Changes have to be made. Luke Getsy is one of the polarizing figures on the Raiders. He was when he was in Chicago. He was kind of the fall guy. Antonio Pierce used those words for him earlier last week. And when you move a guy from the sidelines up to the press box, you're trying to create a change. When you move him from the press box, the only other place to go is out of the stadium completely, which is what we saw with Luke Getsy. The offensive line has not lived up to anything close to what they should be. Yes, there's injuries. Yes, there's a lot of things going on. But the adjustments just haven't been there outside of that first opening drive for the Raiders in the past month and a half.
And we're going to be getting into, in the next block, all the firings as well as the hirings a little later on. But let's talk specifically about this game as well. I mean, Chase Brown, this was his first time rushing over 100 yards. He had a career high 120 rushing yards. Looked like, LT against this team. Willie, what was the deal with the defense in stopping the run? And Mike Gesicki looked like Travis Kelce. What was your thoughts from a defensive standpoint?
Well, I think more than anything, this was supposed to be the strength of the team, right? Was the defense. We were supposed to see the defense keep the Raiders in games, and hopefully Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell would get those late strikes, or the rushing game would be able to drain the clock, monopolize the time of possession, get some key scores in. But the defense was supposed to be key. I think more than anything, man, you're out there a lot more than I am, but you can attest to this, they looked frustrated. Mm-hmm. Like, here we go again. I don't necessarily know if it was a breakdown in talent and being able to stop. I think that they were on the road. They know the bye week was coming. A lot of times it gets in your head and you see things faltering and you see the writing on the wall. And what I think happened was frustration set in more than anything. And I think that the defense is a lot better. It was not indicative of how talented this defense can actually be.
I think it's pretty obvious the defense doesn't look as good as last season, and that's a whole striking conversation for another time as well. But next up, we're going to be discussing these coaching moves. The Raiders fired 3 coaches. After the break, the panel is going to break it down. We're going to learn all about what's next for these guys.
You're watching Sin City Beat.
All right, welcome back to Sin City Beat. Well, coaching moves were made following the loss to the Bengals. Raiders head coach Antonio Pierce fired offensive coordinator Luke Getsy, as well as offensive line coach James Gregg and quarterbacks coach Rich Scangarello. So the move is somewhat of a surprise, as this was the first full season with this coaching staff. Vince, let's talk about these firings. What did you think initially when you heard the news?
Well, look, like we were just saying, there was two non-negotiables with this team. No matter what you thought they were going to be at the end of the season, whether good, bad, indifferent, their defense was going to be top 10, and they were going to establish the run on a consistent basis. Two things they have not been able to do. The most glaring issue has been the lack of a run game. They're 32nd in the National Football League. Their number one bell cow, Zamir White, was benched 6 weeks into the season. And when you're looking for some kind of spark, as I said, Luke Getsy moved from the sidelines up to the press box. Now he's out of the stadium completely. The offensive line coach couldn't get the best out of that group. It's a young group, yes. Injuries, yes. They still, at some point, Antonio Pierce is the man in charge. He's the one saying, we have to run the ball. At the end of the day, you talk about creating an identity. The Raiders don't have one right now. So when you look at this team, why are they 2-7? Well, I would ask you, what do they do well? Outside of Brock Bowers, can you name one thing that they can hang their hat on from a game-to-game, series-to-series basis? The answer is no. And that's because it's a lack of run game. When you can't run the ball, you're not going to be able to pass the ball because everybody's pinning their ears back going at the quarterback.
So let me ask you a question, because this is floating around social media a lot of places. Devil's advocate here, and this is for everyone. I mean, when your quarterback is Desmond Ridder, when you have Gardner Minshew, when you have a clear-cut deficiency at the quarterback position, how much of this is really Luke Getsy's fault?
I think it's a culmination of things. His job as an offensive coordinator is to take the pieces and put them together to be successful. It doesn't matter what those pieces are. It's your job to make it work. Take the cards you're dealt and make some magic out of it. And he has not done that. And it really does come down to the quarterback play and the offensive line. There's really nothing you can get done in either of those situations with these schmedium quarterbacks, if you will, and this really depleted offensive line. So I think these firings were the right move, but at the end of the day, it's your job to take what you're handed and make something out of it, and he simply did not deliver.
What do you think, Willie?
Yeah, she's spot on. I mean, that's his job, is to find their strengths, where they can work. You know, let's not forget a guy named Joe Flacco won a Super Bowl. He wasn't supposed to be an elite quarterback. A guy named Brad Johnson led the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to a Super Bowl some time ago. He wasn't supposed to be a great quarterback. You're supposed to find the strengths in your quarterback, make them work. But as Vince pointed out, this was supposed to be a rushing team that was going to establish the run, set things up so the quarterback didn't have to do a lot of work.
Yeah, but let's be fair. Joe Flacco's on a whole nother level than Desmond Ridder. I mean, you know,
Wait a minute.
Desmond Ridder didn't start off as the starting quarterback.
Two things can be true. The play calling, the creativity cannot be there. The execution can be horrible as well. Both things are true in this case for the Raiders. So when you look at Gardner Minshew, through the first 4 weeks of the season, he was in the top 5 of completion percentage of all quarterbacks in the NFL. You could sit there and say, well, you know, your quarterback's Gardner Minshew. I mean, he's completing passes. The offense still isn't going anywhere. So that's why when I say things really get off the rails when Gardner Minshew is all of a sudden making bad decisions. He's throwing interceptions, timely situational football that is critical, costing games, a la the Denver game, a la Week 1 against LA where he fumbles the ball, they return it for a touchdown, all of a sudden they're trailing at the half. So when you combine those two things, you get a 2-7 record. It's the low. It's you know, you have the worst record in the NFL because of not just one guy. It's not Luke Getsy. Now there's certain points throughout the season where I've sat there and I've criticized them, like, why are we running the ball 3 straight times, them as the Raiders, when you know you can't operate it? So two things can be true. It didn't matter if it was Gardner, it didn't matter if it was Aiden, and it doesn't matter if it's Desmond Ridder.
And to Vince's point, you don't run it 3 straight times. When you get the ball off of a turnover inside the 3-yard line of your opposition, and Brock Bowers was having the best game out of anybody, and you don't even opt for him, maybe on 1st or 2nd down. Draw play, roll right, pop it in, dink and dunk, something. But you just run Madison 3 straight times, and he gets stuffed. And then you run Minshew on the 4th play. It's the play calling, and yes, you got to hold on to the ball, but he's making bad decisions because he's put in bad situations from bad play calling.
It's getting very fiery in here, and I don't know if Willie's turning red or if it's just the suit. But we're going to be finding out more coming up on a short break. Listen, the exit of 3 coaches brings the introduction of 3 new coaches. After the break, we're going to be talking more about the latest coaching staff moves. The Raiders have named Scott Turner as the interim offensive coordinator, Joe Philbin as the interim offensive line coach, and have added Norv Turner to the coaching staff as a senior advisor. So, Willie, what do you think about these additions to the staff? Of course, Norv Turner used to be a head coach with the Raiders, Chargers, Redskins, so he's been around for a while, but what did you think about these moves?
I find it interesting that Antonio Pierce continues to surround himself with these sort of senior voices, right? Between Marvin Lewis, Tom Coughlin, now you have Norv Turner. I think more than anything, he's there to sort of oversee, let Scott Turner do his thing, his son, but not interfere, but be there as an advisor, mostly for him. I think it's easy for coaches to move into positions when you have sat back and watched what other coaches are doing and see the mistakes, but it's not your place to sort of interfere. So now Scott Turner moving into the interim OC position, Philbin moving in as the offensive line coach. Tweaks can be made. I think it's good that obviously this all happens during the bye week. It's a matter of the personnel. It's a matter of them buying into who's now in place, how they want to finish out this season. We talked to Nate Hobbs on Tuesday during availability, and he put accountability on everybody across the board. And we asked him, hey, what's the message? What message has been sent? Actually, it was Fox 5's Kevin Bollinger said, what's the message that's been felt by the team? He said that anybody can be replaced at any given time. So you better show up and earn your spot.
And we've seen that, and obviously, yes, it is fitting for all these moves to be enacted during a bye week. Mariah, what is this going to look like? Now that we have these coaches in the fold and there's a little bit of a change, do you feel like after the bye week, we're going to see a different Raiders team?
Bro, I'll believe it when I see it. Like, there is really nothing at this point that is selling me. I don't care who is in charge and who's calling the plays. As Vince just pointed out, like, there is a balance between the personnel, what you have, and then also the coaching. And yes, maybe they can find better ways to make it work. And maybe there's going to be better play calling than what we saw with Luke Getsy in the offense. But at this point, I think it, like Willie said, players kind of have to dig deep, go internal, and do what's best for them. We heard Max Crosby talking about at this point. It's frustrating being a part of this team, but he's still racking up his stats. He's still going to get his bag. So that's what the focus is. And so these players just really need to find some internal motivation at this point, because I don't know what coach can come in and save the day at this point with a 2-7 record.
It's interesting because, Vince, Scott Turner was already in the building there working with the team. Now his dad comes into the mix. Marvin Lewis, already there in the building. I believe he has a kid who's working with the team as well. So tell us a little bit about what you think this is all going to look like. Obviously, you were telling me during the break, Antonio Pierce, his history as a head coach, he needs a lot. There's a lot to learn. And
He's
there's a lot of guys.
Job.
Philbin was a head coach. Marvin Lewis was a head coach. There's a lot of guys now who are in his ear who had that job.
Don't forget, Halloween marked his first year as a head coach in the NFL. So he is technically still a rookie. Couple points here. If you're a Raiders fan, you're sitting here saying, I love these moves. Why? Well, because your team is actively trying to get better, whether you agree with it or not. Norv Turner is one of the most respected offensive minds in the last 2.5 decades in the National Football League. Despite whatever record, he is widely regarded as one of the best offensive minds. So that's one. Two, you just fired 3 guys that are massive voices in terms of your preparation during the week. Your offensive coordinator, your quarterback's coach, and your offensive line coach. Those are 3 guys running rooms during the week. You have to fill those in some capacity.
Right.
So Joe Philbin comes in, one of the most respected guys offensive in the last couple of years as well. But when I look at Norv Turner, Scott Turner, that little tandem, do I expect sweeping changes? Absolutely not. I mean, Norv Turner, 72 years old. I don't expect him with the chalk on the chalkboard all of a sudden dialing up brand new plays. I don't see that. That being said, the last time he and his son were together, 2019, with the Carolina Panthers, Christian McCaffrey had his best statistical season of his
Yeah.
NFL career across the board.
And Norv did a great job with the Chargers with LT.
Antonio
Turner.
Gates had his best statistical year when Norv Turner was head coach. Now, am I saying that Zamir White is all of a sudden going to blow up? No, but what I'm saying is he has a knack for identifying talent and elevating who needs to get the ball, how to get them the ball. Scott Turner when he was in Washington, did not have a quarterback that you would say is a top 20 quarterback in the NFL. Yet he was able to elevate a scary Terry McLaurin, and have his best statistical seasons under his watch as the passing game coordinator. So he is big on spacing. He is big on yards after catch. He is big on that West Coast offense, which is essentially getting your best players the ball in space, a la Brock Bowers. Does that get Zamir White going? You really hope so, because you have had your starting quarterback benched 4 times this year. You've had your number 1 running back benched already, and you've had an offensive line that is just dealing with injury after injury. If I'm a fan, I'm sitting there saying, thank you for doing something.
One follow-up real quick, because I love everything you just said. All these moves, the firings, the hirings, just for clarification, how much of it is Pierce, how much of it is Telesco?
This is Pierce.
It's all Pierce.
This is Pierce.
Even though the firings we knew were all Pierce, the hirings, the who he's identifying to be the guy, it's more so him than Telesco.
I believe so.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously Tom Telesco is in those meetings and he's bouncing, but at the end of the day, the coaching staff, Antonio Pierce has and does have full autonomy in terms of those decisions. So he can bounce it off whoever he wants in the room, but it's 100% him.
And he's made that crystal clear. But let's not forget who he meets with after every game. And from my understanding in Cincinnati, Mark Davis was visibly mad, upset after that post-game meeting. So before he even walks into the press conference, there's a meeting. Sometimes we get Antonio right away. Sometimes it's a little delayed. If it's delayed, MD is not happy. And apparently he is. So it's all AP to make those decisions.
Gotcha.
But let's not forget who he has to report to after every single game.
All right, that's a good reminder. All right, so the Raiders weren't sellers at the deadline, yet they are one of 9 NFL teams with only 2 wins. Now, is it too early to consider the draft and that whole QB situation? Well, not here on Sin City Beat. We're looking ahead when we return.
I don't think I can.
Welcome back to Sin City Beat. Well, as the Raiders enter the bye week, the team sits at 2-7. Top of mind has to be the quarterback options in the draft if you're a Raiders fan. So, Vince, who should the Raiders be hoping lands to them in April? And do you really think, Tom Telesco, a lot of people in these executive positions are already looking towards those things?
I think they were scouting the day after the first round of last year's NFL draft when they tried to go and get Jalen Daniels, swung and missed, couldn't get one of the top quarterbacks. I think their preparation on the next quarterback draft class has already started. Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward are 2 names that come to mind. I like Jackson Dart as a sneaky name that's going to probably rise up, the weeks leading up to April. But, for the Raiders, if you weren't before week 3 after the Carolina Panthers loss, you're definitely looking Saturdays at who's playing well. In the college ranks, because at the end of the day, we can go back and forth on, is the defense living up to it? Did Luke Getsy deserve? At the end of the day, if they don't have a quarterback, this is a league of haves and have-nots. You either have a quarterback or you don't, and the ones that don't are the ones that are constantly spinning their wheels in the land of mediocrity or at the bottom of the cellar dweller of the standings. If you have a quarterback, as we saw with Joe Burrow, similar standings, similar record coming into that Week 9 matchup. Who took over the game? The team with the quarterback. And that's not a coincidence. You got to have a quarterback at the end of the day if you want any sort of long-term success.
Mariah, do you feel Raiders fans should be hoping for the best, meaning they rather kind of lose out a little bit these next few games so they can be in that top tier position to get the quarterback they want? Because last time around they missed out on Penix, they missed out on Bo Nix. So what do Raiders fans want as they currently sit right now?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, if I'm a Raiders fan, I'm hoping for the best possible draft position. So if that means losing out the rest of the season, it's unbearable to watch. But it's been unbearable to watch. I don't think anything will really change there. So yes, putting yourself in the best position to get the best player available is what you should want as a Raiders fan for the future, because at this point the season is a wash. You're not going to get anything special out of the end of the season. You don't want to be stuck with like the 15th pick and then everyone's off the board that you need.
Yeah, 100%. And to me, I'm curious, Willie, because I would think at this situation that we have here, maybe heading into the deadline that has passed, the only guys that would have been untouchable would be Crosby, Bowers, maybe Christian Wilkins, but they didn't really do the whole thing besides Devontae. I thought Myers could have been on. There could have been a lot of other guys traded. What did you think about their lack of selling at the deadline?
Well, I think at this point it's a matter of building. You have to think ahead. You have to think for the future. I think right now they know that the season is lost. If they were to go undefeated at 9-7, they're not getting in the playoffs.
Yeah. So why did they sell?
Then they're going to get a lower. Well, let's think about this. Either they're going to tank very tactfully, or how about putting forth the effort and then selling at the end because Max Crosby's available to get a number 1 pick or number 2 pick, because at that point you are in rebuild mode. They've chased off Derek Carr. Devontae Adams is gone. Josh Jacobs has more rushing yards than the entire Raiders team right now. So at the end of the season, if you finish somewhere in the middle of the road where all of a sudden you're picking 7th, 8th, 9th, now all of a sudden Crosby becomes available to get a top pick. You rebuild around your franchise quarterback.
Vince.
The Max Crosby stuff never made sense to me. Mark Davis has been shouting it from the rooftops. They're not trading him. If you're trading him to a Detroit, right? Everybody says Detroit. Mm-hmm. Well, they're going to be picking at the bottom of the first round. How does that help you get your franchise quarterback?
Doesn't.
It does not. So that never made any sense. Christian Wilkins is hurt. Colton Miller just got hurt on Sunday. And when you look at the name Jacoby Myers, because I know that was a popular name during the deadline as well, all the receivers around his range are a 5th-round pick. He's 27 years old. You're going to get a franchise quarterback in April. You don't think a 27, going to be 28-year-old veteran receiver is useful to a young quarterback? You can't just have Brock Bowers next year. You got to have some kind of veteran leadership to help with the ins and outs and with the receiver room as well.
Yeah, so not a lot of options there at the deadline, as we may have thought. Guys, thanks so much for joining us here on Sin City Beat. For Willie, Mariah, and Vince, I'm Mike Davis. We'll see you next time here on Sin City Beat. And I may even wear a red suit.
Break it out.